I was just trying to be nice and give a stray dog a bath. But then a man came storming up to my front door, pounding on it like he owned the place. The first thing he said when I opened it was, "Where's my dog?" I pointed to the goofy-looking dog next to my own. "Right there." He called its name several times, but the dog absolutely refused to leave. The man looked at the situation. "All right. Since the dog won't leave, you're coming with me. I have a Samoyed named Marshmallow. Aside from the shedding, he's pretty much perfect. This one afternoon, the sun was shining beautifully. I figured it was a good time to give him a bath. We live on the ground floor with a small yard, so it's super convenient." I was humming a song, scrubbing away at Marshmallow's long, snow-white fur. That's when a dusty gray shadow squeezed through a hole in the yard's fence. It was a dog so dirty you couldn't tell what color it was supposed to be. It was covered in mud, its fur all matted together. It didn't bark, just stood there a short distance away, staring at me with those big, sad, watery eyes. My bleeding heart didn't stand a chance. "Come here, Semir, you poor thing. I'll get you all cleaned up, too." The little guy was surprisingly well behaved. He didn't even flinch when I sprayed him with the hose. It was only after I'd blow-dried his fur that I realized I'd hit the jackpot. This was no ordinary stray. This was a gorgeous husky with an incredible pedigree. He even had mismatched eyes. Absolutely stunning. Who would ever abandon such a beautiful dog? I wondered out loud. I settled both dogs down in the yard to sunbathe. The two fluff balls snuggled up together were just double the cuteness. They hadn't been sunbathing for long, when there was a loud knock on my front door. I figured it was my annoying next-door neighbor, complaining that I'd woken up his kid from their nap again. I couldn't help but grumble to myself. Does he really have to get so worked up? But when I opened the door, I froze. A tall man was standing on my doorstep. He was wearing a black suit, shiny leather shoes, and his hair was styled immaculately. His whole vibe screamed 8 words. "Do not approach. I am very expensive." And his face, which was handsome enough to make angels weep, looked like someone owed him $1 million. "Where's my dog?" The man spoke. My brain short-circuited. I instinctively let out a little, "Huh?" He seemed to be out of patience and frowned. The husky with the mismatched eyes. It finally clicked. I turned and pointed toward the yard. Right there. In the yard. The husky was snuggled up with Marshmallow, their heads touching affectionately. The moment the man saw him, his expression softened slightly. He strode over with his long legs and called out, "General, come." The husky, General, just lazily cracked open an eyelid at the sound of his name. And then he turned around and pointed his butt right at the man. He even snuggled a little closer to Marshmallow. I watched the man's face darken in real time. He called out a few more times. But General was apparently determined to stay, lying there without moving a muscle. He even started nudging Marshmallow's chin with his head. He was acting like some guy trying to move in with his new girlfriend. I stood off to the side. I wanted to laugh but didn't dare, and holding it in was agony. Finally, after several failed attempts to summon his dog, the man gave up. And then, he said it. "All right. Since the dog won't leave, you're coming with me." "Hold on, buddy. Did your husky eat your brain?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. I also managed to swallow the "Are you insane?" that was about to fly out of my mouth. I cleared my throat, trying to look like I wasn't a total pushover. "It's your problem that he won't leave. You should be figuring out how to get him to go, not telling me to go with you." I even tried to copy the heroines in TV shows and tilted my chin up defiantly. Honestly, I was terrified. He looked like the kind of guy you don't mess with. I was half expecting him to throw me over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. But after hearing me out, he didn't get angry. He actually let out a small laugh. The smile vanished so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. But the hard line of his jaw did seem to soften a bit. He wasn't looking at me anymore. His gaze shifted back to his traitorous dog. General was having the time of his life playing with Marshmallow. Completely oblivious to the epic social fail his owner was currently experiencing. "You're right," the man said suddenly, and I froze again. That was out of line. "I apologize." Wait. Isn't this overbearing CEO character breaking a little too quickly? The way he is now, I can't take him with me anyway. His tone was calm, but then it shifted. "Since he likes you so much, I assume you wouldn't mind if he stayed here for a few days?" He phrased it like a suggestion, but it sounded more like a notification. I opened my mouth, about to say, "I mind very much." But he seemed to read my mind and cut me off. "His name is General. He's very picky and wary of strangers. He's never acted like this with anyone before." The way he said it made it sound like it had nothing to do with him, but everything to do with me. My heart gave a strange little flutter. What was he getting at? Was he praising his dog, or was he praising my exceptional talent for taming even the great General? Before my brain could catch up, he had already pulled out his phone, displaying his contact QR code. "Add me. I'll cover all of General's food, toys, and treats." He paused, then threw out an offer I couldn't refuse. "And I'll compensate you for your emotional distress these past few days. Also, I'll come by to spend an hour with him every day." I looked at the phone screen he was holding out. Then I looked back at the husky who was refusing to leave my yard. My head was a complete mess. Wait. Hold on. Isn't this whole situation getting a little weird? I just did a nice thing and washed a dog. And now I'm being forced to be a foster parent for a few days and have his owner come over for visitations every day? Isn't this basically inviting the wolf into the hen house? But looking into General's clear, innocent, mismatched eyes, I just couldn't bring myself to say no. In a complete daze, I scanned the code and added him as a contact. His screen name was simple, just the single word Simon. His profile picture was a headshot of General, like a driver's license photo. Handsome, but also kinda goofy. "My name is Simon Shaw," he said, putting his phone away and giving me a very brief introduction. Then, he took one last look at the prodigal son in the yard who was having way too much fun to think about going home. He left me with a "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon," and turned to leave. I stood there dumbly at the door, my phone still in my hand, feeling like I was in a dream. Until a notification pinged on my phone. It was a transfer from Simon. When I saw the amount, I almost dropped my phone. "You got it. I can definitely do this. Simon Shaw, a deposit. Let me know if it's not enough. Simon Shaw, and thank you for giving him a bath." My eyes drifted to the goofy dog in the yard. I suddenly had a very strong feeling. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. I'm just your average, everyday illustrator. Simon Shaw is a sophisticated guy who radiates "I'm very expensive." Why would he give me so much money? Just so I could dog sit his disobedient husky for a few days? It didn't make sense. When something seems too good to be true, it usually is. My inner gossip columnist was fired up. My fingers, as if possessed, tapped on Simon's profile. Set to allow non-contacts to see the last 10 posts. Let's see what you're really all about. The most recent posts were all about General's daily life. Clearly a dog person. I scrolled down. There were a few photos taken at what looked like a professional dog competition. The pictures were full of dogs I didn't recognize, but that all looked very expensive. I kept scrolling. The 7th post was from a week ago. The picture was a landscape shot taken in a park. A lawn, a bench, a small fountain. Nothing special at first glance. But when my eyes landed on the blurry figure in the bottom right corner of the photo, my breath caught in my throat. That figure in the yellow dress, bending over to give a Samoyed some water. Wasn't that me? I had taken Marshmallow to that exact park to sketch that day. In a flash of lightning, all the scattered clues in my head suddenly connected. I get it. I get it all now. An unscrupulous dog breeder from the show dog circuit has his eye on my Marshmallow. He must think Marshmallow has good breeding and championship potential, and he wants to buy him to enter competitions and make money. So, his aggressive arrival today was all an act. He left General here to be a spy, to observe Marshmallow's physical condition up close. And that huge sum of money wasn't for my emotional distress. It was a down payment. A down payment to buy my Marshmallow. My face went pale. What a move, a honey trap combined with a sugar-coated offer. I almost fell for it. I rushed into the yard and hugged my sweet, simple Marshmallow. My heart ached. My baby. Someone's trying to snatch you away from your mama. The next day at 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door with a pained expression that screamed, "I've seen through your whole charade." Simon wasn't wearing a suit today. He'd changed into a tasteful casual outfit. He looked less intense, a little more approachable. He was carrying several bags. For General and Marshmallow. He handed the bags to me. His eyes landed on my face, as if observing my reaction. I took them with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Mr. Shaw, you're too kind. Marshmallow is just an ordinary pet dog. He doesn't deserve such expensive gifts." I made sure to emphasize the words pet dog. "Is that so?" He chuckled, the meaning in his eyes practically overflowing. "Well, it seems General has good taste." I scoffed internally. "Yeah, of course he has good taste. He's your corporate spy, isn't he?" He spotted my Marshmallow's potential right away. He walked into the yard, and General and Marshmallow immediately swarmed him enthusiastically. He expertly played fetch with the two dogs. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him like a hawk. Terrified he was about to perform some kind of pre-competition evaluation on my Marshmallow. He bent down and stroked Marshmallow's back. His coat is so well maintained. Alarm bells went off in my head. Here it comes. He's starting his product assessment. He then felt Marshmallow's paws. His bone structure is very healthy, too. My fists clenched. "Now you're putting your hands on him. Like I'm not even here." He seemed completely oblivious to my simmering rage. He turned to look at me, his eyes crinkling with a smile. "Speaking of which, I never asked what you do for a living." I immediately straightened up, on high alert. "Me? I'm just your average, everyday dog lover." I absolutely could not reveal that I was a freelance illustrator. What if he thought my job was unstable and my income was low? That would just make it easier for him to throw money at me until I gave up Marshmallow. My answer seemed to catch him off guard. "Is that so?" he said, pausing as if he wanted to say something more. But in the end, he just swallowed his words and looked down with a little smile. To me, that smile was filled with the confidence of a hunter who has his prey right where he wants it. I gritted my teeth. "Just you wait, Simon Shaw. You think you're going to take Marshmallow from me? Not a chance in hell." That hour passed as slowly as a year. Every single second, I was mentally skewering Simon with my glare. But his composure was unshakable. He completely ignored my fiery gaze and focused on playing with the dogs. An hour later, he put the frisbee away on schedule. "I should get going." Simon walked to the door. As he was changing his shoes, he glanced back at me. "Take good care of him," he said, pointing at General, who was rolling around in the yard. Then, his eyes fell on me again, full of meaning. "And take care of yourself, too." My heart skipped a beat. Here it comes. The next stage of his manipulation. He was implying that I needed to stay healthy and in good shape to make the future Marshmallow transaction go smoothly. I squeezed out a smile that looked worse than a grimace. You don't need to worry about me, Mr. Shaw. Simon didn't seem to expect that reaction. He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything else, turning to leave. The door closed with a thud. I leaned against it, my heart pounding. This was terrifying. This man was so calculating, so meticulous. One wrong move, and I could lose both my dog and my money. No. I'd lose my dog and his money. I can't just sit here and wait for it to happen. An idea sparked in my mind. He thinks my marshmallow has championship potential, right? Fine. I'll turn him into a complete good-for-nothing. And so, I began my useless dog project. Step 1 was to ruin his show dog posture. I told him to shake, and he offered his left paw. I tapped it away. Wrong. Give me your right paw. I told him to sit, and he lay down. I pinched the scruff of his neck. Who told you to lie down? Sit up straight. I also trained him in a special secret technique. Whenever I said the words dog show, Marshmallow would immediately collapse, roll onto his back, and foam at the mouth. After my boot camp training, even Marshmallow started looking at me with a hint of resentment. And General? He just ate and drank his fill in my yard. Watching Marshmallow suffer, occasionally licking his face as a form of comfort. Looking at the two of them, I wanted to scream. This wasn't a corporate spy. This was a deadbeat mooch who came to my house to get free food and hit on my dog. That afternoon, Simon came by as usual. To show off the results of my training, I deliberately called Marshmallow over. Mr. Shaw, you see, my Marshmallow doesn't know any tricks. He's just an ordinary, dumb little dog. With that, I cleared my throat. Marshmallow. Let's go to a dog show. Marshmallow flinched, then dramatically flopped onto the ground. Paws in the air, tongue lolling out. A little bit of the yogurt I just fed him was still clinging to the corner of his mouth. Perfect. I looked at Simon smugly, waiting to see the look of disappointment on his face at having lost a champion dog. However, Simon just stared for a second. Then, the corners of his mouth started twitching upwards uncontrollably. Finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer and let out a low chuckle. I was dumbfounded. What was he laughing at? This wasn't in the script. Shouldn't he be beating his chest and cursing me for wasting such a prize specimen? Simon finally composed himself and walked over. He crouched down in front of Marshmallow and wiped the yogurt from the corner of his mouth with his finger. He pulled his hand back, bringing the smudge of white to his eyes. He didn't do anything else, just looked up at me. His eyes were brimming with a smile he couldn't hide. Plain yogurt. You're pretty creative. My mind went blank. I stammered, what do you mean? I mean, Simon said, standing up and walking toward me, step by step. He backed me up until my back hit the cold wall. Your little tricks are actually pretty cute. It's over. Those were the only 2 words in my head. Not only did he not fall for it, but he thinks I'm cute. Is this an upgrade to his honey trap? Is he trying to get me to lower my guard so he can move in for the kill? I stared at his handsome face, so close I could barely breathe. Just when I thought he was about to do something, my phone rang at the most inconvenient time. I felt like I'd been granted a pardon. I shoved him away and fumbled to answer the phone. It was my mom. Honey, your aunt recommended a guy for you. He's a great catch. I've set up a meeting for you 2 tomorrow afternoon. It's at that Starlight Cafe downtown. As I listened to my mom ramble, I instinctively glanced at Simon. He had retreated to a safe distance at some point. He was now looking down, playing with General at his feet. The lines of his profile were exceptionally soft in the evening light. But I could feel that he was listening to my conversation. On a whim, I said into the phone, okay, yeah. 3 o'clock? I'll be there. After hanging up, I deliberately puffed out my chest and announced to Simon. Mr. Shaw, I'm sorry, but I have a date tomorrow afternoon. I'm going on a blind date. So you don't have to come over tomorrow. I thought he would show at least a tiny bit of disappointment. But he just gave a faint "oh." And then he said something that almost made me drop dead on the spot. Perfect timing. General's deworming medicine arrives tomorrow. I'll pick you up when you're done and take a look at the fence in your yard. That hole needs patching. Dude, do you not understand English? I'm telling you not to come. Not to find another excuse to show up. I suspect Simon understood me perfectly. He just chose to selectively ignore my request for him to get lost. And, on top of that, he was trying to turn the tables. I was so mad I barely slept that night. The next day, I had huge dark circles under my eyes. The kind that even concealer couldn't hide. To be honest, I regretted it the moment I hung up the phone. How could I agree to my mom's setup just to spite Simon? Using some innocent, unsuspecting guy as a shield. It was awful. It was disrespectful to him and a waste of my mom's good intentions. But since I'd already agreed, I had to treat this blind date properly. I sighed and pulled a decent dress out of my closet. I even put on a little makeup, which was rare for me. The person in the mirror looked gentle and put together. Like someone who was actually taking a blind date seriously. When I got to the cafe, my date was already sitting by the window. He was wearing a neatly ironed white shirt and gold-rimmed glasses. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and he stood up to pull out my chair. Vanessa? Hi, I'm Leo. Hi. I smiled and sat down, feeling a little better about him. At least he was polite. However, that good impression evaporated after his third sentence. So, Vanessa, what do you do for work? I'm a freelance illustrator. Oh. Freelance. He pushed his glasses up, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. Is the income stable? How do you handle benefits and a 401k? The smile on my face froze. He seemed oblivious to my discomfort and just kept talking. My family was hoping I'd find a teacher or a government employee. Someone stable, you know, for taking care of the family and kids later on. I stirred my coffee, completely bored. It felt less like a date and more like an interview for the position of qualified housewife. I even started to zone out, wondering if Simon would actually show up. What would he even do? Fix my fence? Who was he kidding? He was definitely just looking for an excuse to get close to Marshmallow. Just as my mind was staging a full-blown drama titled CEO Stops at Nothing to Steal Beloved Dog. Sorry to interrupt. A familiar, cool voice spoke from above me. I snapped my head up. Simon had appeared at our table out of nowhere. He was dressed casually today, too. A simple white t-shirt that highlighted his broad shoulders and long legs. Leo was clearly confused by the sudden appearance of this man. He frowned and asked me, "And this is?" Before I could speak, Simon looked directly at Leo. His gaze was calm, but it carried an immense, unspoken pressure. I'm her boyfriend. My spoon clattered into my coffee cup. Dude, that's not how the script goes. Weren't you supposed to use an excuse like General being sick? Why are you going off script? Simon ignored my shocked, frozen expression. He pulled out the chair next to me and sat down with unnerving ease. He even gave a polite nod to the ashen-faced Leo across from me. She has a hard time saying no to her elders, so she just came to make an appearance. Sorry to make you come all this way for nothing. Simon's tone was polite, but every word was like a slap across Leo's face. This one's on me. He called the waiter over, the whole sequence of actions smooth and utterly dominant. Leo's face went from pale to white, then from white to red. Finally, with a huff, he stood up and stormed out. The world was quiet again. I finally managed to pull myself out of my petrified state. Simon, what the hell was that? Helping you out of a jam. He answered as if it were the most natural thing in the world, sliding the water the waiter had just brought over to me. What's there to talk about with a guy like that? He left me completely speechless. But you said you'd wait until I was done. Yep. He cut me off, his gaze heavy as he looked at me. And I decided you were done. It was a little rude, but he wasn't wrong. My heart started to race. I didn't know if it was because of what he said, or because of the incredible softness in his eyes at that moment. On the way home, I sat in his car, a brand I couldn't name but that looked very expensive, my mind still a complete jumble. My unscrupulous dog breeder theory was now on the verge of collapsing. What kind of dog breeder would crash his target's blind date? And claim to be her boyfriend? It made no sense. It would only make his acquisition of Marshmallow more difficult. The car stopped in front of my building. I was about to unbuckle my seatbelt when Simon suddenly leaned over. His familiar scent surrounded me. I held my breath, tense. He just reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a paper bag. General's deworming medicine. He handed the bag to me, his voice back to its usual cool tone. I took it mechanically. See ya. He didn't say anything more, started the car, and quickly disappeared down the street. I stood at my gate, holding the bag of medicine. The evening breeze blew past, but my head was still spinning. Until I saw the hole in my yard's fence. A brand new wooden board had been carefully tied over it. It was even reinforced with wire. The work was professional. You could tell someone had put real effort into it. I froze on the spot, and the indestructible theory in my mind finally cracked. I think I might have been completely wrong. If Simon wasn't after Marshmallow, then what was all this for? For General? Was a husky really worth a guy who looked like a C-suite executive spending all this money, making house calls, and even crashing my blind dates? That made even less sense. When you have eliminated all which is impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. I stared blankly at the patched-up fence. A ridiculous yet heart-pounding thought popped into my head, completely unbidden. Could it be? He did all of this for me? Once the idea was there, it spread like wildfire, burning through all my rational thought. I thought back on everything he'd done. The first time we met. He said, "Since the dog won't leave, you're coming with me." What if that wasn't a domineering command, but just a clumsy joke? When he saw me training Marshmallow to foam at the mouth, he didn't look disappointed. He laughed. Maybe he didn't care at all if Marshmallow could compete in dog shows, maybe he just thought my little scheme was cute. And today, when he flat out declared he was my boyfriend, my cheeks started to burn, the heat spreading all the way to my ears. I wanted to dig a hole and bury myself in it right then and there. Vanessa, what on earth is going on in that head of yours? The guy was clearly trying to ask you out, and you treated him like a human trafficker. Oh, wait. A dog trafficker. A notification popped up on my phone. It was a text from Simon. Simon, see the fence? I held my phone, my fingertips feeling hot. After a long hesitation, I typed back 3 words. Me, I see it. He replied almost instantly. Simon, it's just a temporary board. Might not look great. I'll have someone come replace it properly this weekend. I looked at the simple, makeshift board, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. I took a deep breath and typed out a sentence. Me, Simon, that photo on your social feed. My fingertip trembled on the screen, and I accidentally hit send. I immediately unsent it. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would leap out of my chest. Wasn't that way too direct? What if this was all in my head? That would be beyond embarrassing. The chat window remained quiet for a long time. I felt both relieved and disappointed. Just as I was about to turn off the screen, a message from Simon popped up. This time, it wasn't just a few words. It was a long paragraph. Simon, sorry, did I scare you? I saw you in the park that day and wanted to find a way to meet you, but I never worked up the courage. Simon, I never expected General to run off on his own, much less end up at your house. To be honest, when you opened the door, I was really nervous. Simon, leaving him with you was the least awkward way I could think of to keep seeing you. Simon, I admit my approach was a little clumsy. And what I did at the cafe today was impulsive. I hope I didn't cause you any trouble. Reading the words on the screen, I felt a warm hand gently squeeze my heart. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. And as I laughed, my eyes started to get a little misty. It seems I didn't just find a handsome husky. So, General was your wingman? There was a pause of a few seconds. Simon, you could say that. Simon, so, as a wingman. Did he do a good job? I could almost picture Simon on the other side of the screen, cautious yet full of hope. The smile on my face grew wider. Yep, he did great. He deserves extra treats. Simon on the other end probably breathed a sigh of relief. Simon, then as his reward, this weekend, can I, as Simon, ask you out to dinner? What does General's reward have to do with you? I looked out into the yard, where the wingman named General was snuggled up with my marshmallow. I typed my reply. Okay. I tossed and turned all night, clutching my phone. Half of me was mortified by my ridiculous dog trafficker theory. I wanted to travel back in time and shake some sense into myself. The other half was filled with an irrepressible joy, bubbling up like soda fizz. So, it wasn't just in my head. This was a long-planned, clumsy yet sincere attempt to get closer. Our weekend date was at a private field not far from the city. It was Simon's idea. He said he'd pick the spot and bring everything. All I had to do was bring Marshmallow and his General. When I opened the door, leading Marshmallow by his leash, I saw him already waiting by his car. My heart still skipped a beat. He was wearing a light gray knit sweater and casual pants. He looked clean and gentle, like a leading man who had just stepped out of a J. Crew catalog. Hop in. Simon naturally took the leash from my hand and opened the passenger door for me with his other hand. The field was even prettier than I had imagined. Simon had prepared for everything. The moment the two dogs hit the grass, they completely let loose, chasing each other with pure joy. Simon and I sat side by side on the picnic blanket, a quiet moment hanging between us. To break the sweet, awkward silence, I mustered up the courage to speak first. I'm really sorry. My voice was as quiet as a mosquito's buzz. I thought you were a dog trafficker. Simon froze for a second, then, realizing what I'd said, he couldn't help but chuckle. He had a really nice laugh. His eyes crinkled at the corners. A dog trafficker? He repeated the words, shaking his head with a look of fond exasperation. With an imagination like that, it's a shame you're not writing novels. My face grew even hotter. But those pictures from the competition on your feed? I mumbled, trying to defend myself. My family's company sponsors that dog agility competition. I was there to present the awards, he explained patiently. As for that photo I secretly took of you. He paused, turning to look at me, his expression growing serious. I was just passing by that day, and I thought it was such a beautiful scene. A gentle girl, a beautiful dog, and the sunlight was just perfect. I couldn't resist taking a picture. I never thought fate would be so strange. The sun, the grass, the gentle breeze. And his tender gaze. My heart felt like it was soaking in warm, sweet honey, soft and syrupy. So, without me even knowing it, I had already become a part of his scenery. We talked a lot that afternoon. About my illustrations, his work, funny stories from Marshmallow's puppyhood, and General's glorious history of destroying furniture. I discovered that this man, who seemed so serious and unsmiling, was actually very gentle and funny. The sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the entire field. The two tired dogs snuggled together, dozing off. Simon suddenly reached a hand toward me, and I instinctively flinched. His hand stopped mid-air. Then, he gently plucked a blade of grass from my hair. "Time to go," he said softly. On the way back, soft music played in the car. I watched the city lights streak by outside the window, feeling an unusual sense of peace and calm. The car stopped in front of my building. I unbuckled my seatbelt, about to say goodbye. But Simon suddenly leaned in. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart about to leap out of my throat. A warm kiss, smelling faintly of fresh grass, landed gently on my forehead. I opened my eyes and met his, which were just inches away and filled with a smile. "Have a good weekend, my." He deliberately dragged out the word, as if waiting for my verdict. "Girlfriend?" I felt like my cheeks were hot enough to fry an egg. Under such a gentle assault, I couldn't seem to do anything but nod. I saw the smile in his eyes deepen. "See you tomorrow," he said. "Yeah, see you tomorrow." I practically floated back to my apartment. Leaning against the door, I could still feel the lingering warmth on my forehead. In the yard, General was diligently licking Marshmallow's fur. Looking at the two dogs who had seemingly pledged their lives to each other, I couldn't help but smile. All right. Since the dog wouldn't leave, I guess I'll go with him. After Simon and I officially started dating, my life changed dramatically. The most obvious change? My refrigerator went from the standard single girl setup to a food blogger's pantry. Under the guise of General needs proper nutrition, Simon would haul all sorts of high-end ingredients to my place every few days. Then, under the pretext of while I'm at it, he'd cook one gourmet meal after another for me. It got to the point where even Marshmallow looked at me differently. Before, it was "Mommy loves me most." Now, it's "Mommy, look, the man who cooks is here again." My protests against this arrangement were completely silenced after Simon presented me with a plate of glistening, fragrant braised pork belly. "You can't bite the hand that feeds you." I gave in. One evening, I was happily sipping a bowl of Simon's seafood congee, when he suddenly spoke up. "This weekend, come home with me." I almost spit out a mouthful of congee. "What did you say?" "My mom wants to meet you." Simon took a napkin and calmly wiped a grain of rice from the corner of my mouth. His tone was as casual as if he were commenting on the weather. My brain immediately went into red alert. Meet the parents? Meet Simon's parents? The high society matriarch who probably lives in some gated community and travels with 8 bodyguards? I instantly pictured a series of classic TV drama scenes. A check being elegantly pushed across a table toward me, accompanied by the line, "Here's $5 million. Leave my son." I shook my head violently, trying to banish the horrifying image. Isn't it a little too soon? I put down my bowl, nervously wringing my hands. We just got together. And, I'm not ready. I looked down, my voice getting smaller and smaller. I was just an ordinary illustrator living in a normal apartment complex. My biggest worries were deadlines and dog hair. And Simon. He was Simon. I was afraid his mother wouldn't like me, that she'd think I wasn't good enough for him. Simon watched me quietly, not saying a word. Just when I thought he'd be disappointed, he reached out and gently ruffled my hair. "Okay, we'll do what you want." His voice was gentle. "When you're ready, we'll talk about it then." I relaxed, looking up into his forgiving eyes. That little bit of panic and anxiety instantly melted away. I thought the matter was settled for now. I thought I had at least a few months to build up my mental defenses. But I was far too naive. 2 days later, I was at home, rushing to finish a project. The doorbell rang. Assuming it was Simon coming to feed me again, I shuffled over in my slippers to open the door. "What are you, The words "doing here" got stuck in my throat when I saw who was standing outside. A woman stood on my doorstep. She was wearing a tailored champagne-colored suit. A string of lustrous pearls graced her neck, and her hair was pulled back in an immaculate bun. She resembled Simon, but her eyes held a refined grace and a sharp, appraising quality that came with age. Just by standing there, she exuded an invisible pressure. My brain shut down on the spot. My paintbrush, which I had been about to poke Simon with, was still in my hand. "Excuse me, are you Miss Vanessa Chen?" The woman spoke. Her voice was gentle but carried a powerful authority. I am. And you are?" I stammered. That ominous feeling in my gut was about to explode. The woman gave me a slight smile. It was polite, yet distant. "Hello, Vanessa. I'm Simon's mother." It felt like 100,000 bees were having a concert inside my head. The paintbrush I was counting on for another 500 battles slipped from my hand and rolled to the Signora's feet. She didn't look down, her gaze remained fixed on my face. I swear, in that moment, I wanted to grab Marshmallow and General and escape through the hole in the fence to flee the city overnight. Hello, ma'am." I managed to squeeze out a stiff smile, running on pure muscle memory. I stepped aside to let her in. Simon's mother gave a slight nod and walked in with graceful steps. Her eyes swept over my small, cozy, but slightly messy living room, a result of my deadline crunch. She paused for a couple of extra seconds at my workstation, which was piled high with art supplies and reference books. Her expression held no judgment, but it made me feel like a student whose parents had just conducted a surprise room inspection. "General, Marshmallow, come here." I nervously called for my 2 reinforcements. The 2 furballs were quite supportive. They immediately ran over, tails wagging. General even rubbed his big head against Mrs. Shaw's leg. My heart was in my throat. I was terrified he would get her expensive-looking suit dirty. But Simon's mother just glanced down, a faint smile touching her lips. "It seems you've taken good care of him." Of course, I laughed nervously, not knowing what to do with my hands. I clumsily poured her a glass of water. Then, like a student who'd done something wrong, I sat bolt upright on the small sofa opposite her. The silence was terrifying. I could even hear my own heartbeat. "Miss Chen," Mrs. Shaw said, breaking the silence. She picked up the water glass but didn't drink. "Do you normally work from here?" "Why, yes. Painting must be hard work, isn't it?" Her tone was gentle. "I hear from Simon that you sometimes work very late to meet your deadlines." My heart sank. That's Simon. Why does he tell his mother everything? Didn't that just expose all my flaws, like staying up all night and having an irregular schedule? It's okay. I'm used to it. I enjoy it," I mumbled in my defense. Mrs. Shaw nodded and put down her glass. Her eyes, which were so similar to Simon's, looked at me seriously. "Actually, a young woman doesn't need to work so hard. Here it comes." "It's here." Alarm bells blared in my head. The variation of the check, the stay-at-home wife invitation, is here. "While our family may not be top-tier aristocracy, we are quite comfortable," Mrs. Shaw continued in her gentle tone. "Simon is our only son, and the entire family business will be his one day. As his partner, you won't need to toil for a living." She paused, seemingly to gauge my reaction. "I see you take good care of General and your own little dog, and you have a gentle disposition. After you and Simon are married, wouldn't it be better to stay home, support your husband, and raise a family? You could paint in your free time as a hobby. Support your husband and raise a family. A hobby." Those words fell on me like 8 mountains. I admit, in that moment, I felt a little wronged. My dream, my career that I fought for. Everything that shone so brightly in my eyes. In her words, it was all dismissed as disposable hardship and an insignificant hobby. I took a deep breath, my hands clenching into fists on my lap. I looked up and met her gaze. Ma'am, I love my work very much. My voice was quiet but firm. To me, it's not just an income, it's my dream and my sense of self-worth. I have never considered giving it up. Mrs. Shaw didn't seem to expect such a direct refusal. The smile on her face faded slightly, but she maintained her composure. It's good for young people to have their own ideas. She stood up, seemingly unwilling to continue the conversation. It's getting late. I should be going. I quickly stood up to see her out. At the door, she stopped and looked back at me. Her gaze was full of meaning. Think about it. Simon might seem like he has a mind of his own, but in reality, he listens to me. The door closed softly. But I felt like I had been struck by lightning, frozen in place, a chill running through me. What did she mean by that last sentence? Was she implying that, if I don't agree, she'll make Simon break up with me? I turned to look at the two dogs still playing carefree in the yard. For the first time, a huge sense of doubt and unease about my future with Simon washed over me. After Simon's mother left, I felt like all my strength had been drained. I collapsed onto the sofa and didn't move for a long time. The living room was terrifyingly quiet, with only the ticking of the clock on the wall. The happy sounds of General and Marshmallow chasing each other in the yard now sounded harsh to my ears. That husky was the beginning of my connection with Simon. And now, he was also the evidence of my connection to his distant, unreachable world. His mother's words were like a series of fine needles, pricking my heart. Especially that last line, Simon might seem like he has a mind of his own, but in reality, he listens to me. That sentence replayed in my mind like a curse. I started to spiral, my thoughts running wild. If I insisted on not giving up my career, would Simon really listen to his mother and choose to leave me? I realized the real obstacle was the invisible but very real wall called being in the same class. Should I tell Simon? The thought had barely formed before I crushed it. How would I even say it? Go crying to him, tattling on his mother? Saying, your mom came to see me. She wants me to give up my dreams and be a housewife. She even threatened me, saying you'd listen to her and dump me? That would be so pathetic. I didn't want to put him in a difficult position. Even more, I didn't want him to see me as a girlfriend who only brought him trouble. I took a deep breath, stood up from the sofa, and walked to my workstation. I looked at the familiar brushes and paints. At the unfinished manuscript on my drawing board. The part of my heart that had softened with love began to harden again. This was my foundation. I couldn't lose it. When Simon called me that night, I was buried in my work, trying to numb myself. Busy? His voice was as gentle as ever. It came through the phone, carrying a reassuring strength. On any other day, I would have whined to him, complaining about how unreasonable my client's demands were. But today, I just gave a faint The other end of the line went silent for a few seconds. What's wrong? Simon keenly sensed that something was off. You don't sound like yourself. Nothing. I tried to make my voice sound lighter. Just a rush job. I'm a little tired. Don't work too hard, he advised. I'll come see you tomorrow afternoon. I'll bring you that strawberry cake you love. Don't, I blurted out. I'll probably be busy all day tomorrow. I didn't want to see him. I was afraid that the moment I saw him, all the hurt and anxiety would come pouring out. That the calm I had carefully constructed would instantly shatter. Simon went silent again. This time, the silence was longer. So long that I thought he might be angry. Okay. That was all he said in the end, his voice unreadable. Well, make sure you eat on time. After hanging up, I stared at the dark screen of my phone, feeling an empty void inside me. The next day, I forced myself to focus on work, but my productivity was surprisingly low. My mind kept flashing back to his mother's well-maintained face. And Simon's emotionless okay. The doorbell rang anyway. My heart trembled. I looked through the peephole. Of course, it was Simon. He wasn't holding a cake. He just stood there quietly, an unreadable, complex expression on his face. I hesitated for a long time before opening the door. Why did you still come? I told you I was. I came to see you. He cut me off and stepped inside. He didn't go to play with the dogs in the yard like he usually did. Instead, he walked straight up to me and looked down. His gaze was piercing, as if it could see through all my disguises. Vanessa. He rarely used my full name like that. What's really going on? I told you, I'm fine, just tired from. Look at me. He gently cupped my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. Tell me again that you're fine. I looked into his deep eyes and saw my own panicked face clearly reflected in them. All my forced nonchalance, under his focused, worried gaze, began to crumble. I opened my mouth, but not a single word came out. My eyes, however, started to redden against my will. When he saw my tear-filled eyes, his expression darkened, and the atmosphere around him instantly dropped. He let go of my chin and gently pulled me into his arms. Did someone bully you? His voice was soft but laced with a hint of coldness. Tell me. Who was it? Simon's embrace was warm and solid. It had the power to make you let down all your defenses. I buried my face in his chest. All the grievances I had forcibly suppressed, as if finding an outlet, burst forth in an instant. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. It was. I sobbed, my voice breaking. Your mom. She came to see me yesterday. I could clearly feel Simon's arms around me stiffen. He didn't speak. He just gently stroked my back, over and over, as if he were calming a frightened little animal. His silence gave me the courage to continue. She said. She thinks my painting is too hard, that a girl doesn't need to work like that. She said. She hopes that after we get married, I can stay home and support you and raise a family. She said. My dream, my work, it's all just an insignificant hobby. With every word, my heart felt like it was being pricked by a needle. Those words, seemingly gentle but laced with thorns, felt completely different hearing them from someone else versus repeating them myself. One was condescension, the other was reopening my own wounds. I lifted my tear-streaked face to meet his deep, bottomless eyes, and finally asked the question that had kept me up at night, tossing and turning. Simon, she said that even though you seem to have your own mind, you actually listen to her. I stared into his eyes, not missing a single flicker of emotion. So, if I can't be what she wants, if I don't want to give up my work, will you really listen to her? My voice trembled with a fear I hadn't even realized I was feeling. This was my last card, and my greatest terror. I was scared. Scared that our seemingly solid relationship, faced with the chasm of reality, would be as fragile as his mother suggested. Simon didn't answer right away. He just raised his hand and gently wiped the tears from my face with his thumb. His movements were slow, deliberate. Then, he sighed. A sigh full of self-blame and heartache. I'm sorry. He looked at me, each word clear and distinct. I didn't handle this right, and that's why you got hurt. There was no hesitation or doubt in his eyes, only a reassuring firmness that put me at ease. Vanessa, listen to me. You were doing great long before you met me. So you don't have to give up anything you love just because I showed up. You are you, first and foremost, and then you're my girlfriend. You can always be yourself, confidently. Your career, your dreams, they are not some disposable hobby. They're a part of you. They're what makes you shine. I will never ask you to give them up. His words were like a warm current, instantly flooding through me, dispelling all the cold that had been gripping my heart. As for my mother, he frowned, his eyes turning colder. I respect her, but that doesn't mean she can interfere in my life, decide who I love, or dictate what kind of life my wife should live. That line. She said it for you to hear, but she also said it for me to hear. But she was wrong about one thing. Simon cupped my face. His forehead touched mine, our noses almost touching. He gazed into my eyes, his voice low and solemn. I only listened to my girlfriend. I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. Tears were still clinging to my eyelashes, but the corners of my mouth were already turning up uncontrollably. All the anxiety, fear, and hurt vanished because of his words. The storm I had been dreading didn't even exist in his world. I wasn't facing that high wall alone. He had been standing by my side all along. You goofball. He caressed my cheek with his thumb, his tone full of affection. If anything like this happens again, just tell me. Don't let your imagination run wild. I nodded emphatically. Burying my face in his chest, I took a deep breath of his reassuring scent. I hear you. In that moment, I was more certain than ever. General was the best wingman in the world. He didn't just bring me a boyfriend. He brought me a man who would choose me, steadfastly. Plan a future with me, and shield me from every storm. In the 3rd year of my marriage to Simon, my illustration collection was finally published, and I even had a small, well-received solo exhibition. The favorite pastime for Marshmallow and General was to lie on either side of my feet, basking in the sun with me in my studio. My relationship with Simon's mother remained civil, if not warm. Over the years, we had perfectly embodied the concept of mutual respect without intimacy. We didn't live under the same roof. On holidays, I would prepare a gift and go with Simon to his parents' house for dinner. At the table, she would politely serve me food, and I would politely thank her. We'd chat about the weather and current events, carefully avoiding any topic that might cause friction. She never again mentioned me quitting my job to become a housewife. And I never again felt that suffocating pressure from years ago. Between us, with Simon as a buffer, with unspoken boundaries, we maintained a delicate and fragile peace. I knew she hadn't accepted me. She had only accepted the fact that Simon chose me. Saturday was Simon's mother's birthday. Simon started discussing it with me a week in advance. Mom doesn't want a big party this year, just a family dinner at home, he mentioned casually as he helped me clean my paintbrushes. All the relatives will be there. My hands paused. Okay, I'll clear my schedule for that day. He hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. He looked at the piece I was working on. I'll take care of the gift. You just need to show up, he said softly. Don't feel any pressure. I smiled and turned to kiss his cheek. I know, Mr. Shaw. He was always like this, carefully protecting me under his wing. Trying to shield me from anything that might make me uncomfortable. But I knew some things I couldn't avoid. On the day of the birthday, I prepared a gift myself. A silk scarf with an orchid pattern I had hand-painted. Not expensive, but full of heart. The Shaw family villa was bustling. I walked in on Simon's arm. The relatives sitting in the living room all turned to look at us in unison. Their gazes were filled with curiosity, scrutiny, and a faint, familiar sense of distance that I had grown accustomed to. Dad, Mom, we're back. Simon led me to his mother. Happy birthday, Mom. I handed her the gift box. A polite, practiced, and distant smile on my face. Mrs. Shaw took the gift and nodded. That's very thoughtful of you, Vanessa. She opened it in front of everyone. When her eyes fell on the pattern on the scarf, she seemed to pause for a moment. That's beautifully painted, a lavishly dressed relative beside her exclaimed with exaggerated praise. Vanessa is so impressive now, a famous artist. Not like our daughter. She quit her job as soon as she got married. All she does is shop and go for afternoon tea. The comment was framed as a compliment, but it was a subtle jab at my unconventional path. I just smiled and didn't respond. Mrs. Shaw put the scarf away and said lightly, It's good for young people to have their own careers. It just makes them so busy. Look at Vanessa, she's even thinner than the last time I saw her. She looked up at me, her gaze calm. You two have been married for 3 years. A career is important, but you should be thinking about children, shouldn't you? A woman's body doesn't recover as well when she's older. Simon is our only son. You can't just keep him waiting forever. The living room fell silent. All eyes were on me. The baby pressure. It was a topic I had expected, but it was still suffocating. It was the new weapon she was deploying in our seemingly peaceful standoff. My hand at my side clenched unconsciously. I was trying to think of a graceful way to respond. But Simon spoke first. He took my cold hand and pulled me behind him, completely blocking the scrutinizing gazes. He looked at his mother. His tone was calm but firm. Mom, Vanessa and I have our own plans for that. I'm not ready to be a father yet. He took all the responsibility onto himself. Simon paused, his eyes sweeping over the gossiping relatives. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone to hear. Whether we have kids, and when we have them, has nothing to do with any of you, does it? In that moment, standing behind him, looking at his broad back, I was reminded of that evening years ago. He had held me just like this and told me, I only listened to my girlfriend. For all these years, he has been living up to that promise. He respects my dreams, supports my career. He has shouldered all the pressure from his family for me. He never asked me to reconcile with them. Nor did he ever ask me to change for anyone. He just stood firmly by my side. Facing this imperfect but very real life, together. On the way home after the dinner party. The car was quiet. I rested my head on his shoulder, watching the vibrant city lights stream by. I'm sorry, he said suddenly. I made you unhappy again. I'm not unhappy. I turned to look at his perfect profile. Simon, thank you. Thank you for letting me always be the confident, independent, shining version of myself. He didn't seem to expect me to say that. He paused for a moment, then smiled. He freed one hand and ruffled my hair, his tone full of affection. Silly. The car pulled into our familiar apartment complex and stopped downstairs. I looked up at the warm light shining from our window. My heart was at peace. General squeezed out from the hole in the fence. He brought me the best man in the world, Simon. All these years have passed. The invisible wall between his mother and me still exists. Perhaps it will never disappear. But what does that matter? I don't need to climb over that wall.